Good morning, Liz. How are you? So wonderful to have you on my podcast this morning.
I'm great. Thanks, Janine, for having me here. I'm excited to be talking with you today.
Well, I'm just super excited to share your thought leadership and genius with the wider world. You are such an important part of my Elevate community, and I want to say thank you first up for your intentionality around giving and supporting others, the way that you show up, the way that you provide support to people in our community, and the help that you give of navigating the world of grants. I'm seeing and I'm noticing. So thank you for showing up, being you, and constantly being in service. It's exactly the sort of people I love working with. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. And I do love the Elevate community and the connections. And as you say, I do just love helping people to find grants because not enough people know about them.
Well, that's what we're talking about today, because you run a session for me, and the mic drop moments, the ahas, the oh my goodness, I didn't realize that came out of the session that you run just blew me away at the end of that time. And the amount of feedback that I got was phenomenal. And I know that my little ecosystem is such a tiny blip in the universe compared to how many business owners are out there that could get some real insight and value from hearing what is your passion piece, which is grants. So that's why we're here. We're going to spend this morning talking all about grants. So let's kick it straight off. This is something that you are really passionate about. You live and breathe it. Your name pops up on so many social media channels as the recommended guru of all things grants. From your perspective, Liz, why are grants something that people should start exploring and even considering as part of their business growth plans?
I think with grants, they're a bonus. The governments at all levels, council, state and federal, have money to give away. It's our taxpayers' money. It's my philosophy that if we're eligible, and there's always eligibility criteria and application forms to fill out, then we need to be in the chance for the approval to get that money in our bank account. And this all started when I did a couple of stints in government a few years ago and was just blown away that these grants even existed. I think we go into business using our own savings and we think, oh, the government's not going to help us. We're a private business. And that's where people get it wrong, where there are lots of opportunities. And that's across community groups, sporting clubs, businesses, not-for-profits. There's more than 2,000 grants out there in Australia at any one time. That doesn't mean to say that you're eligible for all of them, but let's try and look and see if there's at least one that we can apply for. They're to be deemed as a bonus to fast track some projects and to have a greater impact on the world as well.
So your point there around the fact that the government here in Australia is actually making funds accessible through grants that businesses can apply for. As you said, they're not always going to get them, but fundamentally, there is money out there that we as business owners can apply for to support our businesses. Can you just share a little bit more about what some of those grants can be used for? What have you noticed in the last sort of few months in terms of the categories of availability?
Yeah, so we've got to think about what the government priorities are and what they're trying to achieve. Essentially, grants are being outsourced by the government to do projects on their behalf. They're saying, rightio, other organisations are better and more efficient at doing these projects and getting a wider reach across Australia or across the area that they're trying to target. But in terms of categories, energy efficiency is a massive one. I've just had 8 clients all get their $25,000 grants for energy efficiencies. And for all of those businesses across Australia, they were absolute game changers. There were 1,700 businesses approved for that particular program. That was one of their priorities, and they've followed through with it. So for the government, grants are an easy way to get everyone else to do the work for them, and all they have to do is hand out the money. But so energy efficiency, sustainability, workforce, obviously mental health and social belonging are probably the key categories at the moment. But in saying that though, if you look for a grant, there will be one somewhere. We just have to get smart about what we're looking for, what kind of themes and opportunities are within our business. And that's what I help people with in terms of the strategy. You might have a project that you want to do or expand on something you're already doing. And you might think that, oh, well, there's never going to be a grant for that particular project. There's probably not. But what does that project bring? What does it achieve? And what objectives does it cover off? That's what we need to start thinking about. And I promise you, every single project that you come up with, if it's a growth project, will have at least 5 to 7 themes or categories that we can start looking for grants for. And that's what blows people's minds, that they start thinking differently about it. So, for example, I use a simple example of a yoga workshop. There's never going to be a grant that says we want to run yoga workshops. But what does that yoga workshop bring? It brings social belonging, community, health, exercise, sports and recreation, all of those things. And they're the types of grants that we'd be looking for. And you're going to be using the vehicle of your project of the yoga workshop as your application.
That's amazing. I'm imagining there's grants that people can access for technology or improvements in their business. I saw you pop into our group this morning, an opportunity that exists in Queensland at the moment where people can apply for a grant to support their professional development. So it's anything, any project that fundamentally is about growth of some kind. If you can put in the time and effort, there is likely to be something somewhere that you might be able to access. Is that right?
Correct, absolutely. And if it's not through your organisation on your own, you need to think about who can you collaborate with. Yeah. As I said earlier, all grants have their eligibility. Some grant programs only not-for-profits can apply, for example, but you might have a project that fits beautifully to the eligibility for the project part of it. So go and team up with a not-for-profit. Go and offer your services to them and do a joint application. So that's the type of opportunity and strategic thinking that we need to get into. At the same time, the funding pool of funds is diminishing and the number of businesses and applicants is increasing. So it's getting more competitive and you only get one chance, just like an exam, to showcase your project in plain text and normally in about 300 words. So that's also the art of it. You might have a amazing project, and I've got a grant that I'm actually applying for at the moment, and I've got to write about 600 words for the entire project. I've got about 20 pages of brainstorming. So now I have the task of distilling that down to the 4 questions of only 150 words per question. And that's the only words I can include in that application and no other attachments.
Oh, you see, that I think is where the hard work comes in, isn't it? You mentioned a couple of times there that there's a strategic way of applying for these grants. Before we get into that, can we just go back a step and talk about what are some of the biggest pitfalls that you see, or what is stopping businesses from taking advantage of this opportunity, or even putting the time in to get curious about how can I get financial support from the government through grants to help my growth versus a bank loan, right?
Yeah, grants you don't have to pay back, so that's a big advantage if you are successful. But the biggest pitfall is time. Grants are a long game, so you have to be proactive, you have to be thinking about them, you have to be looking for them, you have to know what you want. And as a chartered accountant, first thing I always say to everybody, I'm always thinking about the money. What are you going to spend the money on? Like, you can have a project, but if there's nothing to spend the money on, what are we applying for? That's a big pitfall, but not being ready. And the other thing with grants is they're normally open only for 4 to 6 weeks. So if you only find out about that grant on week 2 or 3, you're running your businesses, you're doing everything else, it all just seems way too hard and ends up at the bottom of the pile. All of a sudden it's the night before it's due, those submission dates don't change, and it's too late. And they've just simply missed that opportunity. So it's about being on the lookout, but being prepared, having your financials up to date. That's a big one. Some grants might be a 50% matching, so they'll only give you 50% of your project, and you need to have those other funds. If you don't know your cash flow or your forecast cash flow, then you don't even know if you can apply for it. So that's the first thing. We need to work out whether we're eligible. And also thinking about, are we set up properly? Have we got our business set up in the right entity? Are we registered for GST? In Australia, if you're in business, you need to be registered for GST because you will just miss out on the opportunity to apply for grants in the first instance. So there's all these little things that add up. But I always talk about being grant ready and starting on that process of getting your ducks in a row so that when that perfect grant program comes out, you're ready to apply for it and you can do a really sound application. And the other thing is making sure that you are relationship building. So most of my grant applications, we're going to attach what's called a letter of support from other businesses that we're working with or other communities that are going to benefit from this project. And if you haven't created those relationships, it's way too hard to ring them up the night before and say, hey, this project would be great. You're going to benefit from it. Can you please write me a letter of support? But it's due tomorrow. They're just going to say no. So we need to be prepared and we need to be thinking about what type of grants we can apply for, who we are going to involve, and how are we going to do it.
How do I actually find out what grants are available? You mentioned just now that sometimes it pops up and you've got 2 weeks notice. And I'm imagining that's when people go, oh, it's all too hard. What advice would you give to people to essentially increase that awareness of what's actually out there? How do we find out about grants as they come up so that we can start increasing our awareness of the opportunities out there for us to apply for grants?
I would sign up to all the newsletters from your local council, from your state government, any grant providers that you are aware of. Go onto their website, sign up to their newsletter. I know we don't want a jammed up email box, but these ones are important because quite often the governments will send out one email and one social media post, and that is it. They do not advertise the grants. They're not readily there. We need to be looking for them and being proactive. There are search engines, search directories such as the Grants Hub, which is a paid directory that you can sign up to, and you can create your own alerts for certain grants and certain categories. And that's actually also a service that I offer where you can outsource that to us and we can be doing that searching for you as the starting point. Because as you say, if we don't know where to look and we don't know where to find them, we can't apply for any grants. So we need to start from the beginning. And we also need to be looking and talking to other business owners about, if you notice that someone's had a big development, ask them, how did they fund it? What grant was it? Go and look it up. Go and look up those past projects. And I promise you, if you start thinking about grants, something will come up reasonably quickly. And if you're starting to plan what you're wanting, you'll find what you're looking for.
I do remember you talking about the fact that the location of your business, the need or requirement around that has evolved quite a lot since the pandemic. Can you maybe talk to that for a couple of minutes in terms of that location? The thinking used to be, I'm residing here or my business is registered here, therefore I must or I'm only able to apply for grants where I'm registered. You were saying recently that that's evolved since.
It has, yeah, definitely. And today, as you say, that Queensland grants come out and they've been very specific that to be eligible, you have to be headquartered in Queensland. So we've all got a business registered. We've got our ABN registered with a postcode. That is where you are registered. You can only have one of those. So you're probably thinking, well, hang on, I operate in 20 different areas, 5 different states, but I've only got one company, and that's fine. Some people might tell you, and be careful here, go and register a business in every different state or territory. Don't go and do that. But you do have to be careful. So some grants will say it is on your postcode of your ABN, and unfortunately there's nothing we can do about that. So again, be strategic about where you register your business. Where is most of your work done? If you were living in a country town and now you live somewhere else, go and change it. Go and change it. Take that 5 minutes to change it. And the other thing that the grants programs have done is now they've said as long as you operate in a location. So remember, you'll be registered in one postcode, but if you can say we operate in this other location, then the councils will allow you to apply for those. During COVID, so many people missed out on so much stuff because they were multiple locations and the governments were simply saying, no, whatever your postcode is on your ABN, that's the only place you can apply. So that's how it's evolved, which is great because they were missing out. There were people locally operated, because they're only registered once, and that doesn't change, and that's correct. Then we need to be able to be aware of that, and again, be able to know how to read the eligibility criteria and what are they asking for. So Queensland, you could be registered somewhere different for this particular grant, but if you can prove you've got a headquarters in Queensland, then you can apply. And the other thing is, remember with the eligibility, they're trying to catch people out. They want as least people as possible to apply because they know it's going to be oversubscribed without them trying. So they put in all these finicky little requirements, and we need to make sure that we match them all. I had one client recently where she'd read the 30 pages of the guidelines, and I was thinking, I don't think you're eligible. And she'd picked out one line on about page 4. She's like, oh, but I've got that. I said, yes, but you don't have the preceding requirements on page 2 and 3. So you just have to be really careful, and that catches people out. I've had know of people that have applied for grants. They were a winery. This particular grant said wineries cannot apply. It actually said that. And they still put an application in and then wondered why they got rejected on day one after they submitted. So that's what I'm here for. I'm happy to chat to anyone about eligibility because that is the first tick. If you're not eligible, you're just wasting your time. Forget about it. Move on. Find something that's more relevant and that's you can actually apply for. But yeah, the location and actually thinking about how can you justify how you operate in that location. So yes, I've got clients all over Australia that I work remotely online with, but I would never say that I actually operate in any other areas apart from Melbourne and Queensland. So just think about that of how you could write it in an application to say, this is why I think I operate in XYZ area.
I hope my listeners can pick up on your passion on this. And I think, one of the things I know about you, you are absolutely passionate around helping businesses access these funds. It's the thing that I know gets you out of bed. It's the thing that gets you on the phone at crazy hours of the day. It's the thing that I know keeps you up at night as you're determined to try and get these grants approved for businesses. As you said earlier, there's money available, and businesses, which are the lifeblood of our economy, are missing out on the funds that could potentially help them employ people, put in place new business initiatives, get the training they want, invest in technology, whatever it is. This is what gets you out of bed. So what would you say? Do you know what your win rate is?
Yeah, my win rate's 85%.
Look at that, 85%. So out of those...
And 100% submitted on time.
Look at that. That's amazing. Because as you're talking, I'm going, oh my God, that sounds like too much like hard work applying for those, which is why we engage people like you, right? What's your favourite win? What's your favourite, the one that makes your heart sing, that you went, oh my gosh, thank goodness we did that?
Oh, I mean, there's been so many, and I have worked across, sports clubs, businesses, not-for-profits. But I think recently the 8 clients that we applied for the energy efficiency grants, simply because I sat there for 2 whole days pressing refresh on the website because the system crashed. And I got my clients to apply for them and do submission, but a couple of them I did myself. And everyone was texting me saying, can't get in, it's crashed. I'm like, keep going. And we got them all in through that perseverance. And I truly didn't think that we'd get them all approved. So that day, a few weeks ago, when I started getting the text saying, we've got it, thank you. And they didn't even say, well, I knew what they were talking about. And then they all came through, and 8 out of 8. So that was a $25,000 energy efficiency grant for new aircon systems in a cafe, in an office, on a farm, and one was for a pool filtration for a swim school. And that $25,000 is a game changer because that is going to not only increase the efficiencies of their energy bills, so decrease their costs, but also it elevated. One of them sold their business recently, and that was the reason behind, because they had all the infrastructure there. So, you would say, well, 25 grand, I was going to spend it anyway. Well, a lot of these businesses have struggled through COVID. A lot of these businesses I've worked with for years, they're still hanging on, and it's just given them the boost to keep going. And that's why I truly do it, because that 25 grand is made such a big difference to them as opposed to a government agency or a not-for-profit getting $1 million program. Like, they're great, don't get me wrong, but to me, small business, most of them were also regional. And so being able to have to have that perseverance. The government delayed the announcement by 2 months. They were hanging on. I was getting texts every now and again saying, have you heard? And I'm like, no. But yeah, to get 8 out of 8, I think I surprised myself. And the equipment grants, I think, are probably my favourite because they're a bit more black and white. You've got the quote for whatever you're going to get, and then you can tell the story of how this is going to have the impact for that business.
Congratulations. That's just awesome. And as you
Thanks.
said, generally you don't have to pay it back, the cash.
No. With grants, you don't pay it back at all. So unless you don't do what you said you were going to do, then you do have to pay it back. And there's always a little bit of wriggle room as well in that once we've got it. And I think that's the other thing that I sort of forget that I do. I do that advocacy. I will contact the providers, and it's much easier to say, oh, my client is asking this. And I've had non-responses from government agencies when the client has rung up and tried to contact them. They just haven't got back. Whereas they then recognise that they're paying a consultant to help them, and so I get a response. So it's all those other little things. And also where people are like, oh, maybe I could add this in, and they're like, oh, I'm not sure. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it, And I think the other thing is tall poppy syndrome. We are so bad at writing about ourselves in a positive light. So I write grants in a really positive way, that we're going to get them and that it's going to have that impact, and we make sure we include all the great things that we've done. And I think I have that ability to be able to extract that from people to say, hey, you tell me what you've done. They'll give me a couple of sentences and I will build that out to the 500 words or whatever it is. And if there's a 300 word limit, I will use 299 of it to showcase, so we can stand out and get that big tick and get that money in our bank accounts.
So this is essentially what you do to help businesses. As I said, it's your passion. You've talked about being able to proactively look for grants. You've talked about it's important to be grant ready. And then obviously there's that final piece of submitting the grant and keeping on top of the application. Knowing you and how you work, I know that this is your gift and what you give to your clients. I think for so many of us, it just goes in the hard basket, too hard basket. And I think depending on the scale or size of your business, having the capacity in your team to be able to invest that time. The reality is it's often challenged on other things like getting leads and getting sales and managing the business. So can you just line for me a little bit more about how you work and how you support? Because I think the fact that this money is actually available, it makes absolute sense to me that as business owners looking for growth, we should be thinking strategically about how to access grants to facilitate the next stage in our business. So what support do you give? Essentially, is it you do all of that for your clients?
I do, yes. And I basically say, if you're thinking about growth and grants, just get in touch, because every business is different. Every grant application is different. And depending on your skills and capability and time and resource, I have clients that I am doing the searching for the grants for them. And then when we find the grant, I help them write it. I have some clients that we might write one grant and then they've gone off and used that and written the rest of their grants. And then I have other clients that go, oh, that seemed way too easy. You can do it again, and off you go. One thing I will say with grants is they're an investment. So they're a long game and they're an investment. So it'll pay off over time. I promise you that. It just won't be immediate. Especially when we have to wait 3 or 4 months for the outcome. But like an exam, we do it, submit it, forget about it, and wait for the approval to come through. And then I also help people develop their strategy of, if there was a grant, or what does your growth look like in your business? And that's probably my most important step in there. If you don't know what you're looking for, don't know how you're going to grow your business and what are all those options, that's where we need to start. And then, of course, I can write the grant for you, and I love a good deadline. So as I say, 100% submitted on time. And we can also develop the project as we go. So there's some grant writers out there that they literally get people to tell them what their project is, and you never see them for 2 weeks and they go off and write it. I work in a very collaborative style, taking that strategic approach, and you might start off with a really basic idea, and by the end of it, it's turned into something amazing. And you might have thought you were applying for 100,000, and all of a sudden we're applying for 600,000 because we thought of all these other things that can fit into the eligibility criteria. So that's how I help, and I can help you in any way for grants, depending on your budget and where you're at and the size of your business, the areas that you're in. And that's why I do it the way I do it. So it's not just writing it. And also I do mentoring as well. So I'm working with an organisation at the moment where we are working together to build their capability and capacity so that they can write their own grants in the future. So that's been a really fun project to work with them as well.
I am going to put, or for my listeners, anyone listening in that's interested, I'll put Liz's details in the show notes. And I also know Liz has got a whole heap of resources that she constantly shares. So this has just been an awesome conversation. The 3 key things that stick out for me are those around, proactively looking for grants. It's almost a level of responsibility that as business owners, we should be doing, because that curiosity identifies opportunities that we can apply for. The piece about being grant ready, I know, is one of your bugbears, and also huge opportunities, because then you can move quickly. And that final piece around actually taking a strategic lens to what grants you apply for and how you go about it, and playing that long game. Not just about, oh my God, I need to do this, I need cash, is there a grant? But actually thinking strategically about how you're going to use those grants. My final point, anyone listening in here to think about is, and I'm quoting you here, Liz, you said, if there was a grant, what is the growth opportunity in your business? And I think for anyone listening here, I highly recommend you spend some time just thinking about that, thinking about your business, thinking about those growth opportunities, thinking about if you could access a grant, where is that growth opportunity? Because it could be building capacity in people, building capacity in your processes, building capacity in your infrastructure, building capacity in terms of new market opportunities or product development. So really encourage you listening in to take some time to just think about that. And if you need any help, Liz Fleming is your girl. I will put her contact details in the show notes. And Liz, just thank you. Your generosity exceeds in leaps and bounds. You are such a gift to so many business owners, and I'm grateful that you're in my world. Thank you for letting me pick your brains this morning and sharing you with a wider audience. And thank you for everything you do. It really helps businesses continue to thrive and continue to grow.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And start looking for those grants.
Thanks, Liz.